Get ready to go back to the beach.
Golly! Back home, peoples are starting to sparkle up and poof, and they vanish.
Like a magician doing a magic trick.
And with time running out,
We gotta get them back.
Well, maybe we should just tell them where they're from.
Layla, Tanner, you just made up characters from a movie. You are not real.
Maybe I would have eased it into him a little more gently.
Those people are made out of rubber.
Teen Beach 2.
Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to the DCOM review. A few weeks back, we took a closer look at Teen Beach Movie, a decent film with plenty of highs and lows, and now it's finally time to jump back into the water as we discuss the sequel. I've been adamant about my position on this movie insofar as to say that it's one of the only DCOM sequels that functions well, but does the idea of a sensible continuation equate to a quality movie? Well, let's find out. Spoiler warning now, you know the drill. With all that said, let's dive into Teen Beach 2. We start things off with Mac and Brady, still portrayed by Maya Mitchell and Ross Lynch respectively, going on a special date during the last night of summer. Brady sets up a projector that leads us into our first song, Best Summer Ever, which is about as subtle as a 6-foot hammer, but hey, these movies pride themselves on being more ornate than most. It's a pretty fun song, but with the summer now officially over, Mac and Brady have to confront the horrors of a high school classroom. This gives us our introductions to the school-based side characters of the film, Devin, Elisa, and Spencer later on. Devin has the always awkward job of pointing out all the ways Mac and Brady are different in terms of their educational focus. But if you watch the first movie, the distinct viewpoints Mac and Brady have on schooling and planning for the future shouldn't surprise you. Eventually, Mac reminds Brady of a college event she wants to go to with him, and Brady promises he'll make it, which, as most of you should know, is movie speak for he'll be very late, so that this movie has a sensible enough reason to wedge a gap in between the two. But in all seriousness, this move does make a lot of sense, and I'll get to why soon. But before Brady can arrive late, he's trying desperately to figure out the whole college thing, and wonders where his life is heading. That's probably the best situation to put Brady in, because it does well to show and not tell the contrast between our two leads and what they're up to with their lives now that their summer is behind them. So once Brady shows up late, Mac and him get into a fight and break up, but we kinda saw that coming. The real reason is, why? It's because their lives are moving in two different directions. There have been a plethora of breakups on Disney Channel, both in movies and in shows, and the most viable reason to separate two people who otherwise care about each other proves to be conveying their priorities being divergent. You may recall similar reasoning ending the relationship between Austin and Allie too, before they got back together for good in the series finale. So Brady is on his own now, so of course he sings about it because this is still a musical after all. This movie diverges from the first in a major way once it becomes clear that there is time spent focused on both the Wet Side Story universe and the real world. Within the Wet Side Story universe, Leela is starting to have doubts about her place in this universe in the aftermath of having met and subsequently having been influenced by Mac from the first movie. This starts off as a tiny intuition that eventually develops into the core of the entire film, but we'll get there. Leela continues to struggle with her identity as just a cardboard film character, and eventually decides that finding the necklace she once gave to Mac was a sign that she should leave her universe behind and venture into ours, with Tanner following her, and the other Wet Side Story characters staying behind for now. So Mac and Brady are still not on the best terms when Tanner and Layla eventually show up in their world, and the fight is temporarily put on pause so that they can deal with the new development. Kind of funny how Brady refers to them being here as impossible since he spent an entire movie last time around in their world and he didn't think it was impossible then. This leads into the song Right Where I Want to Be, where Tanner and Layla express their joy of having entered Mac and Brady's universe. I will say that even though the trope of outsiders being blown away by technology and modern developments is overused, I think that Tanner and Layla's intoxicating good attitude makes it viable here. While all of this is happening, the Wet Side Story universe is a bit out of sorts because without the lead characters, they don't really know what to do with themselves. This leads to a funny number where Chi-Chi and Seacat are having this microphone battle of sorts as they both try to sing Fallin' For You in their own unique ways. It's a fun scene, but the gang is no closer to figuring out what to do about their situation, and it becomes even more complicated when people within the movie universe start vanishing. So Mac and Brady bring Tanner and Layla to school with them and try their best to keep their movie-based traits hidden from the rest of the student body, but that doesn't last for too long. Tanner and Layla aren't just surviving school, they're embracing their new world, especially Layla, who's taken a particular liking towards the STEM subjects. This leads into the song Turn That Frown Upside Down. Remember when I said that Tanner and Layla had intoxicating personalities? Well, this is exactly what I meant by that, as their compulsion to sing and dance have literally infected the rest of the school body and turned Teen Beach 2 into a true-to-form unapologetic musical. But this song isn't just a fun lunchtime performance, it's a clever metaphor. The idea of turning that frown upside down symbolizes the real world being influenced by Tanner and Layla, but it also symbolizes change in a broader sense. The kind of change that mostly Layla, but Tanner as well to a certain degree, are going through as characters. Layla is using this new world to become an intellectual go-getter, someone who isn't defined simply as the damsel in distress that she portrayed in West Side Story. Tanner is also advanced as a character, since he's been established as goofy, happy, and whimsical, but is now contemplating how he might not be enough for Leela, and since he does care about her a lot, it's a legitimate concern. It's also a great way to convey how similar the current state of affairs look for both Brady and Tanner as characters, who are both dealing with a love interest, potentially leaving them behind. This interaction is paralleled by Mac and Layla's conversations, where Layla talks about wanting more from her life, while Mac is still trying to convince her that going back to the movie world would be the best thing for her because she has a boy there that loves her. Layla beautifully counters her argument by stating that Mac has the same thing, but still wants more from her life, as she should. This leads into the brilliantly conceived Silver Screen musical number that feels like an updated version of the original film's Can't Stop Singing, in its attempt to convey all the positive sides of the film universe, while the original song from the first movie conveyed all the negative sides. In the aftermath of that, Layla refuses to go back to a world where she's forced to act flat and flings the necklace into the ocean. But, unbeknownst to our four leads, is the fact that characters keep disappearing in the West Side Story universe. Eventually, Butchie and the others find Layla's necklace and use it to travel into Mac and Brady's world. Once everyone from West Side Story reunites, Butchie eventually convinces Layla and Tanner to return home, since that's the only way to stop people from vanishing in their universe. This leads to the Save the Beach dance. Why? Because every DCOM has its dance. Brady and Mac still aren't on speaking terms, which prompts the characters of West Side Story to return to their world in order to intervene. Regardless of what your opinion is on how legitimate their reasoning is behind risking their very existence, you cannot deny that it leads to one of the all-time greatest choreographed dance performances ever constructed in a Disney Channel original movie. And that's no small feat, because DCOMs have an extensive history of musical performance. But this one just might top them all. It's fun, it's pure energy, it gets the point across like only a Teen Beach movie can, and the dancing is spectacular. Unfortunately, coming back to our world continues the trend of vanishing movie characters, namely Butchie, who disappears with Layla's necklace in tow, trapping the others in this world. Or does it? In a smart move by the film, they take what's probably the biggest logical failure of the first film with Mac's magical surfboard and turn it into a plot device here. The reason I say it's a smart move is because even though the surfboard itself is pretty dumb mechanically, in the context of this movie, it's still a viable option, so embracing that flaw and not running away from it is actually the best way to handle the situation, and it also creates some real tension. So it all comes together as Brady figures to use his waveless surfboard to help Tanner and Layla get home. I have a real problem with the whole make-up moment that Mac and Brady have as a direct result, because they're busy having a full-scale conversation while their friends could literally cease to exist at any moment. And it doesn't make matters any better when the quartet decide to sing some more before actually attempting to leave, which, of course, leads to problems with the surfboard. It's legitimately a tension-filled moment, where it's a little bit hard to say whether or not Tanner and Layla will actually make it back. But this scene, while well done, is undercut a bit by the fact that it wouldn't have even been an issue if these guys didn't waste so much time. This leads us to the infamous ending, the closing minutes of this movie that have been constantly brought up by a number of you, where Mac and Brady forget each other and their relationship essentially starts over because Layla took Mac's advice and changed the movie to become Queen of the Beach. It's a good way to cap off Layla's arc as a character that sought out self-empowerment starting in the first movie and finishing here. This ending also gives us another really fun closing number that's really easy to dance to after you've seen the moves a couple times. But does the ending work? Does it make sense? Could it even legitimately happen? We'll discuss that in detail when we break down the movie as a whole. And now, the characters. The side characters don't really change too much, although some of the West Side Story characters are given a few more lines, but they are essentially just there to inform us that weird things are happening. The new side characters don't really provide too much either, outside of being simpler versions of the main duo of Mac and Brady, so not too much to say about any of them. They all serve a basic function, and that's more or less all they're given to do. The duo of Mac and Brady aren't as much the focus this time around, although their characters do develop by the way of school and their different ways of looking at their futures. It's pretty much the same kind of relationship dilemma that affects Troy and Gabriella in High School Musical 3, what with the college drama and both female leads being smarter than their male counterparts. But their problems here always feel like real ones, because that's exactly what they are, because this movie, unlike the first one, primarily takes place in the real world, where song and dance can help, but doesn't always automatically fix whatever the actual problem is. In fact, it's after Tanner and Layla witness the two arguing that they begin to understand that there are pitfalls to the real world as well. They don't function with the same intentionality as the first movie, but again, it works here because the forces that separate them are legitimate ones, and the roles they play make sense. But since the timeline was turned on its head near the end, any and all development they had kind of flew out the window since they're basically different people now. Tanner has some great moments in this movie. Nothing about his character changes too drastically from the first film to the second. It's more a matter of his humor landing this time around, and being generally less awkward than in Teen Beach Movie. The way he embraces the real world is fun, but he also engages in some real emotions as well. Feeling sadness, worry, uncertainty about his own future, and what, if any, part Layla has to play in it, those struggles are conveyed well, and it's not something the original would have delved into. His development in this film makes him a more complete character, which is almost always a good indicator of a solid character, and he was a vastly improved character this time around. Layla is Queen of the Beach for a reason. She owns this movie in almost every possible way. The entire point of her character is to strive to become more than what she is, and not let the inherent limitations of what others expect of her hold her down. When she enters the real world, she proves to be driven, diligent, focused, and intelligent, all while never losing her natural charm and positive outlook. It would have been so easy to turn her into a drastically different character once the real world got a hold of her, but this movie intelligently doesn't do that, in favor of simply bringing to the surface traits that she already had but never had a reason to express. She's not just a great character, she's an empowering one who refuses to let a guy that loves her be her primary identifier. Now, that's not to say that she's becoming some shrill man-hating caricature, not even close. She still cares about Tanner, but not enough to subject herself to the flat character she used to be in West Side Story, and the only reason she goes back is to save everyone. But most importantly, she changes the movie, both Teen Beach 2 and West Side Story, by becoming the kind of character that is capable of great change. I wouldn't call it Oscar caliber acting, but it is one of the best character arcs ever constructed in a DCOM. And that's Teen Beach 2. So, what's the verdict? Teen Beach 2 proves that you can have fun while also being sensible about where things go and what characters do in the context of your film. While most DCOM sequels feel like just episode 2 of whatever the original happened to be, without really adding too much nuance or development, Teen Beach 2 is essential because it functions as the second half of the Teen Beach film pair. The original works to capture the West Side Story world and the characters within it, in the understanding that while musicals are fun, there are flaws too, and both aspects are touched upon. The original also understands that characters can be deeper than what they appear to be on the surface, which is exactly why Mac eventually befriends Layla and ends up liking the movie. Teen Beach 2 works with that idea and makes Layla's transformation the central focus, while also conveying both the good and the bad of the real world. At this point, we all know that Jeffrey Hornaday is very well versed with smart narrative design, and this movie is another good example of just that. Teen Beach 2 is a good sequel because it doesn't just reintroduce us to the same characters, it challenges them, and more importantly, challenges them in much tougher ways than in the first. This isn't just dancing our way through West Side Story anymore, this is the real world with real stakes. But this movie is far from flawless, and it has a number of shortcomings. The writing is both better and worse at the same time. Allow me to explain. The original had intentionally cheesy writing as a means to support the larger semi-parody narrative it was aiming for, which works and doesn't work at different times. This movie takes place in the real world, so the dialogue is a little more standard, but also not that good, making a lot of the moments come off as flat or unengaging. The music is pretty solid, but the soundtrack isn't as captivating as a whole compared to the original. And while we're here, let's have a closer look at that ending. So, because Layla changes the movie, time changes to make it so that Mac, and not Brady, ends up becoming infatuated with the film. The end result makes some sense, but does it function mechanically? The answer is no, it does not, and here's why. If changing the movie universe changes time, that means the entirety of the 1960s would have been shifted. In Mac and Brady's world, West Side Story as a movie is kind of a big deal to a certain older generation. A real-world equivalent would be like changing Star Wars so that Leia was the one who stayed on Tatooine and Luke was a prince instead of a farmer. It would have drastically changed the perception of that movie from a hero's journey to a tale of how a young female rose against the odds to defeat the Empire. Millions of people worldwide would be inspired by that tale, but in a different way, just like how Mac is inspired by Queen of the Beach, which means a lot more would have changed. The ripple effect of changing a major motion picture from the 1960s would in all likelihood make it so that Mac and Brady were never born, especially since Mac's grandfather has that magical surfboard to begin with, which may point to him having connections to that universe, which, as we know, has now changed. So yeah, not a very functional plot point all things considered, but I have seen worse ways to end a film. All in all, Teen Beach 2 is not a great movie, but it's a good one. Despite all of its positive points, there's too much within it that doesn't work to praise it any higher than that. I think it's a sensible form of narrative progression from the original and the better of the two movies because of the performance we get out of Layla and the intelligent way it handles a few different ideas. But, as I mentioned, it's not without its flaws, especially on the writing side of things, and the ending just doesn't work for a variety of reasons. The most brilliant thing about this movie is how it utilizes the idea of change and projects it as one giant metaphor throughout the entirety of the film. Everything is about change and moving forward. Some characters, like Layla and Mac, are marching forward, while other characters, like Brady and the Wet Side Story gang, are trapped in their own frame of thinking, with both sides wanting to go back to the way things were, aka Teen Beach Movie. Because for those characters, that was more fun. That was summer and surfing and no worries, basically Brady's whole character, but when the fun ends, you have to adjust your focus and get a bit more serious, something Layla and Mac embrace. But it's not about changing yourself. In fact, there's an entire song about the need to be you. No, this movie is about realizing that you already have the potential for greatness. You just need to see it, which is exactly what Teen Beach 2 is as a movie and as a concept. Teen Beach 2 progresses from the wacky, fun summer film that was the original into a film that has plenty of fun and energy, but is inherently more coherent, more focused, more sensibly plot-driven, and has better character arcs. This movie isn't telling us to lose ourselves, it's telling us to be better versions of ourselves, and Teen Beach 2 is a perfect example of that because this movie is essentially a better, more focused version of the original. It's still very much a Teen Beach movie, for better and for worse, but it's one that knows that there are more important things than sun and surf, and that's the whole point. That's a pretty sensational idea, and with a few modifications, you can see how a movie like this could have easily gone from good to something truly great. If you're in the populace that absolutely loves the original, you might like this one as well, but maybe not as much. If you thought the original was too wacky at times and you're looking for something considerably more toned down, you'll likely enjoy this movie more than the original, as I did. But I will say that you should watch both movies if you can, because as I keep mentioning, that's how they work best. It's not just movie 1 and movie 2, it's two pieces of a larger puzzle that does well to take ideas from one movie and advance them in the next, something few DCOMs effectively manage to do. And if for no reason other than that, I can confidently recommend this movie. So, give it a watch and decide how good it is for yourself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, throw down a like, subscribe for more, and share everywhere. And don't forget to follow the Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Links down below. The coming days will bring episode reviews for Girl Meets World and Liv and Maddie, as well as a Zapped DCOM review, likely a week or so from now. Also, I was recently inspired just out of the blue to make a brand new top 10 video, what with the big DCOM celebration all this month, and I think you'll all like it. No, it's not quite the top 10 best DCOMs yet, but we're getting there. I just need to watch 3 more DCOMs and then that top 10 video will be on its way. So, lots to look forward to. Until then.
Gotta be, gotta be, gotta